This is Battleground, the MMA debate show where we debate a subject until it is done. I'm Mike Ginn. That's professional kickboxer, the mechanic Brandon Catino. Every week we jump into a subject, debate it from top to bottom. Of course, you're watching this on the Fighters First Network, so hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and jump in the comments, be part of the show. Tell us who's right, tell us who's wrong, or just jump in there with your own opinions. This week's topic: what is the best fighting style in MMA? We've always talked about it, Brandon. Mixed martial arts is made up of a lot of core elements: wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, you name it. There's a number of different grappling techniques. There's Muay Thai. It's another big one. A number of different striking techniques that make up mixed martial arts and comes into a whole. You know, everybody talks about MMA versus boxing, but boxing is a core element of MMA. So we're going to jump into this today. Brandon and I are going to talk about what we feel not just is a good base, but also is a good winning formula for MMA. You know, we look at a lot of the champions, and a lot of them, you know, kind of have somewhat of a similar background when it comes to looking at their forte. So we're going to jump into that. Brandon, I'll start with you. Give me your top 3-4 styles that you love to watch, and tell me, like, what do you think as somebody who trains full-time? You're a professional kickboxer. Obviously you're going to be more prone to, like, more bias towards striking and different techniques as far as that. But do you think that is the best base for MMA, or do you think it's something like wrestling or jiu-jitsu?
And to answer your question, is actually wrestling is the best base to start out as. If you can, you start out with wrestling. Why? Because you can dictate where the fight goes. You can either keep it standing up or you can take it to the ground. So that's why, to me, for MMA, because you could be either on the ground or standing up, you want your wrestling. So this way you can stop somebody if they try to take you down, or hey, if you're getting beaten up standing up, then hey, you take them down, you can control them, and you can win it that way. So that's why, to me, wrestling is the best base to start out if you can.
But what about striking? What about like a good base like boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai?
Boxing is good. Boxing is good to have because, to me, it allows you to have good footwork, and also too, you run and be able to have your defense as well. You know, and your offense. But like saying, but that again, but like if we're just about just what's the best to start with, saying wrestling is what it is. But then to me, after that, would you want to have your boxing or kickboxing? You don't really want. I mean, Muay Thai is cool and all, but to me, Muay Thai, you're more flat-footed. Like, to me, you want to have that footwork, like boxing and kind of kickboxing. You have a little bit more better footwork than you would if you just did Muay Thai. But I just say boxing because you just use your hands. You kind of be like how a BJ Penn was, you know, where he used his jiu-jitsu and he was a boxer, or like a Kamaru Usman. Now he's a wrestler. He's kind of stepped up his boxing, or even my guy Joe Daddy Stevenson. He was that way too. He was a wrestler and he had his boxing as well.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot as far as wrestling being a base. Another thing I'll throw in there is jiu-jitsu. I think grappling. If obviously in a dream world, you come in, you have everything, right? Like, you know, oh my God, you're a striker, you're a grappler, and you're this and that, and you can take it wherever it goes, right? There's only a handful of those men and women in the sport. There's not very many Valentina Shevchenkos. There's not very many John Jones. You know, most people have a base. And even John Jones is another guy, wrestling. Wrestling seems to be the format. So I hate to agree with you. I do think wrestling is probably the most important. But I think grappling in general, I think when you talk about it, if you're in trouble, if you don't have a lot of skill, getting somebody to the ground and being dominant in that is usually a better winning formula than trying to catch somebody with a punch or kick, especially in MMA where a lot of people are grabbing on you, closing the space, making it dirty, kind of roughing things up. When I think about in general, I think it's like 1A and 1B when it comes to wrestling and jiu-jitsu, because I don't think a wrestler wants to be on the ground with a black belt in jiu-jitsu, right? Because while some wrestlers like Usman or somebody are really good at controlling, getting their head in the chest, and doing some of those techniques. A lot of wrestlers are like takedown and then what's next, right? Like the only problem I have with wrestling being number one is I watch some guys who kind of get easy wins or get wins without a lot of skill because they're wrestlers. And I do see it. We're wrestling fans, right? You look at a Bobby Lashley or a Jake Hager, right? They come in and they get these wrestling and they kind of dominate the wrestling part, right? But I remember watching Bobby Lashley when he first like started MMA, and I hope he's improved at this point, but he doesn't really fight as much anymore. He couldn't throw a punch to save his life. Like his punches almost looked like wrestling style, professional wrestling style punches, because it just didn't look like he had anything behind them. And you're talking a big, like 250 plus pound man, and his punches look weak because he's so used to like using all that muscle and strength and core to just get you down and to grapple you on the ground. Jake Hager, I think, has a little bit more, but only it's more like ground and pound. It's not really like a striking type game. That said, the reason why I bring those up is because you have an elite guy like Kamaru Usman, John Jones, who have these high-level wrestling pedigrees. Daniel Cormier, obviously, who just retired not too long ago, high-level wrestling pedigree, that they transitioned into a more skilled a more rounded skill set to become stars. But I think about the base of MMA. I think about the Hoist Gracies of the world and the Gracie family for what they've done in MMA. You're right there in a hotbed in New Jersey, Pennsylvania. The Gracie Jiu Jitsu is big there, obviously as well around the world. I don't think boxing, as great as it is, translates if you don't have some kind of takedown defense. I don't think kickboxing translates as great as it is if you don't have some kind of wrestling and takedown defense. I think when it comes to the core, I agree with you. I think wrestling at the core, you have to know how to take somebody down. You have to, more importantly, I think than anything, you have to know how to not be taken down, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're a striker, you can't do anything on your back. Look at Israel Adesanya, right? One of the best strikers in the world. What did Blachowicz do to him? He laid on him for basically 3 of the 5 rounds and won pretty easily. You saw Izzy kind of tighten up that takedown defense against Vettori. But if you had another guy who's stronger than Izzy, that could probably happen again, right? You saw when Blachowicz fought Glover. Glover had a better wrestling game and constantly kept taking him down to do everything else, eventually getting the submission. You look at a Francis Ngannou, who, as great as he is with his hands, he actually won the title by being able to finally take down Stipe, right? Like when he tried to strike with Stipe the first time, what had happened? He got beat up. Stipe played with him like for the last couple rounds. When he was able to take down, spit on Stipe's back, do all this wrestling stuff, what happened? Different game. So I agree with you. Wrestling is probably the top base, but I really think that jiu-jitsu is probably right next to it. That's my idea on that one. But let's transition this conversation further.
No, man, I gotta get back at you on that, because the reason why I don't put jiu-jitsu in so high is because in order for you to do your jiu-jitsu, you can
tap anybody at any time. The submission is part of the game.
No, but you have to be able to get this person down to the ground. If the fight doesn't go to the ground, where you getting your submissions at?
Well, how's that any different than wrestling?
No, what I'm saying is, though, with wrestling, you can do takedowns. Just because you know jiu-jitsu doesn't mean that you can get the person down to the ground. Like
both of them on their feet, they're a fish out of water.
You look at a Brian Ortega. That dude, where does he get his finishes? When he's on his back, he doesn't get his finishes when he's on top. He doesn't take anybody down. You look at you even look at a Damian Maya, jiu-jitsu practitioner. But what did he do? He came actually to New Jersey and went to a wrestling school, so that way he get his takedowns good, so that way he can take the person down and then get on top and get his submissions going.
The reason I throw
dude, why do you think like so far the Gracies that you brought up, why basically really majority of them aren't doing so well is because they can't get the fights to the ground because they don't have that they don't have good takedown.
I mean, I would argue Neiman Gracie's doing pretty well.
I'm saying, yeah, But I'm saying, but we think about his last fight though. What is it? He wasn't standing up. He was hitting strikes. He was using his punches.
Yeah, I think you have to evolve, obviously, but we're talking about like what you come out as the base. And a wrestler, if they get you to the ground, are they going to lay on you for 3 to 5 rounds?
Yep, that's all you need. And you just ground and pound, as they say, lay and pray. Hey, man, I think about Frankie Edgar, man, Jersey's finest wrestler, won the UFC lightweight title. He was a blue belt in Jiu Jitsu. Wasn't a purple belt, wasn't a brown belt, wasn't a black belt. He had his wrestling and he had his boxing. That's what had him beat BJ Penn. And BJ Penn is a black belt in Jiu Jitsu. BJ Penn also had boxing as well, but I think those takedowns helped him out. So he had his wrestling and his boxing. I'm going with wrestling boxing over BJJ in boxing.
I look at a Charles Oliveira. I look at a Gilbert Burns. Not just the Gracies. These guys, high-level jiu-jitsu guys. I look at a Dustin Poirier who used that jiu-jitsu to get out of a tough situation against Conor McGregor that last fight, where he knew how to alleviate the pressure of the guillotine because of positioning, right? Yeah, not many people are going to walk the cage like he did with his feet, but he knew to turn into it. And of course, that was just the only way he could do it, by going up the cage. I think jiu-jitsu, for one, gets you out of bad situations, and two, goes to the other half of how to finish a fight in MMA, submissions. Now, I'm not taking away from wrestling. I agree. If you can't stop from being taken down, even more importantly than actually taking somebody down, I think you're dead in the water in MMA. I think if you're a striker, a high-level striker, what are you going to do on your back? So that always comes down to me. Like, I look at a Holly Holm who came over from, boxing. I'll go more recent. Look at Clarissa Shields and what happened when she fought Abigail Montez. Abigail Montez actually knows a little bit of striking from her Muay Thai stuff, but she knows more MMA than Clarissa Shields did, and she laid on her for 3 rounds, right? So I agree with you with the wrestling. I just think the reason why I put jiu-jitsu in the conversation is because of the submission game. You can end a fight at any given time. You look at Frank Mir versus Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar mauled him. But in that first fight, what happened when he caught that heel hook? Mm-hmm. Or what happened against Tim Sylvia when he broke his leg? It broke his arm and his arm popped out. The Nogueira brothers. Like, jiu-jitsu, obviously we know in MMA today, if we look at these champions, a Kamaru Usman, Francis Ngannou, a Valentina Shevchenko, these are champions that are good in a lot of different aspects of the sport, not just one. They've been training. They may have come in with a base, but they elevated. You look at young guys like Cyril Gane, who came in more with a Muay Thai kickboxing type background. Adesanya, same thing. But they had to develop their wrestling to stay alive. I look at guys like Gilbert Burns, and like I said, lightweight champion Charles Oliveira, at the time of this show, in case you're watching this 10 years from now, how did he win the title? Like, how does he get those 8, 9, 10 victories in a row? Because
dropping those elbows from that Muay Thai that he learned. That's where he got it from.
Check left hook. No, that's shout out to our guy, Tim Wheaton. But once he gets you on the ground, it's lights out, right? And there's guys that you don't want to be on the ground with. Fabricio Verdum is another guy. Like, there was times he was outmatched in heavyweight fights, and what did he do? He just tried to pull guard. He'd even lay on his back at some point and be like, come on.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Jacare Souza.
But that right there just helped me out. Like I said, he's trying to pull guard. This means because he can take him down. That means you have to go down with him. But if you stay standing up, what was that jiu-jitsu going to do for you? Unless
just saw Anthony Munoz. That guy, he's a future contender. Like I said, Jacare. There are a number of guys that came in with a jiu-jitsu background that, the Eddie Bravos of the world, these people that go and compete in these submission grappling tournaments. You see how big it is right in your backyard with CFFC now doing the submission grappling tournaments. They got a big show coming up at the end of the year. Suggs promotion, Chael Sonnen and all that stuff. There's a reason why. Jiu-Jitsu is always going to be a core. Is it the best? I will agree. No. I think you need to have that explosiveness of wrestling to change the game. I think you need to be able to, like, you can't be a Ben Askren, right? You can't come in there one-dimensional and just wrestle, because you're going to find out when you fight a Jorge Masvidal that a flying knee is going to put you on your ass. You need to be able to mix it up in MMA. This is MMA. We're talking about it from a more base standpoint, but we do know none of us are stupid. Brandon's been in the game a long time. I've been covering the game for a long time. You have to have more than one technique to win, or you're not going to win. You might win a fight or two, but you're not going to win very much if you can only do one thing. But if we're going to go to just the base, I'll let Brandon say his piece, and then I'll say mine. You sticking with wrestling as just you have to have it to, like, succeed in MMA?
To me, I mean, to succeed, I mean, everybody's different, but to me, if you want to start out with a base, wrestling is the way to go, because like I said, you get to dictate where the fight goes. You can either keep it standing up or you can take it to the ground when you have good wrestling.
I agree. God, it's not much of an MMA debate show if we agree. At least we went toe to toe with, like, we went toe to toe with the second subject.
You can't go against me. You know, I'm speaking facts.
We're not in Atlantic City, Brandon. Calm down. You are speaking facts, though. I mean, when we talk about it, you look at the Khabib Nurmagomedovs and how his disciples and Makhachev and Kabulaev and all those, and his, Usman Nurmagomedov.
Kazman's out, right? With his wrestling.
That Dagestani wrestling that Alex Soto talks about a lot, because he trained with him as well. That format is just like on anything else on the planet. Like, just that kill or be killed. Like, I'm going to get you down, and I'm going to control you while you're on the ground. There's different formats and different styles of wrestling, but I think when it comes down to it, I think wrestling is what you need. You look at it, Justin Gaethje, we know for his hands, but he was a collegiate, like, All-American, I believe, in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Chandler, the same thing.
Eddie Alvarez,
Colby Covington, Daniel Cormier, obviously Kamaru Usman, Glover Teixeira, John Jones. Stipe was a collegiate level champion in wrestling.
Ryan
you talk
Bader,
about
Corey Anderson.
You talk
Bill
about
Davis, baby, Mr. Wonderful. Can't forget about the pink shorts.
Mr. Wonderful. We talked about Brock Lesnar.
Mm-hmm.
University of Minnesota. He was the wrecking machine way before we ever knew him on a national stage. Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, all those guys we see on WWE TV now will wreck you. Kurt Angle will wreck you because of wrestling. We talked about the Jake Hagers and Bobby Lashley's that cross over into MMA and are successful because of wrestling. And then you talk about a CM Punk who couldn't do it because all he knew was jiu-jitsu. So I see the argument, and I agree with you 100% that wrestling is the base. But to play devil's advocate, there are a couple other bases. Obviously, Brandon's, like, very biased towards the striking.
I'm
biased towards the grappling.
Striking. I'm talking about wrestling.
I know you are. I'm just talking about as a second, third, fourth format. You talked about Muay Thai and some other stuff. I'm not disagreeing. I know you said wrestling. I'm agreeing with you. Let me agree with you for once.
All right.
There might be 100 episodes of Battleground. There might be 1,000. Episode 3 might be the only one that the mechanic and I agree on. So that is that. We think wrestling is the base. Real quick before we get out of here, going forward, do you think that ever changes?
No, because like I said, to me, wrestling is where you get to dictate where it goes. If you want to keep it standing, or you want to take it to the ground.
Even with some of these high level strikers coming in, like the Giga Chikadze's and everything else, who obviously has worked on his wrestling. You saw it in his last matchup.
Exactly, but I'm saying, everybody that's come as a high level striker are working on their wrestling because they know they need that. Like you said, because they're a high level striker. They want to keep the fight standing up. So you need that wrestling defense, that you need that takedown defense to keep it standing up. You're going to say, we think about somebody think of GSP, George St. Pierre. When did he truly become great? When he started to add wrestling to to his game.
When he became an unstoppable wrestling machine.
Exactly. That's when he was taking everybody down, or he was just using his jab. Like his fight against Koscheck, who was another wrestler. He just jabbed them up. But he knew if Costner tried to get in, he could stuff his takedown, and then he could go back to his boxing. So to me, it doesn't matter where you start at. You could be a jiu-jitsu player, you could be a boxer, you could be a kickboxer, Muay Thai. Wrestling is always going to come into your game because you know that's what you need to help you out.
And of course, to succeed, it is called mixed martial arts. You need to have a lot more than just one thing. Brandon's been around the game with Tiger Schulman's for a long time. He knows what he's talking about. He's been in that gym. He's seen some of these. You talk about those Shane Burgoses and Jimmy Rivera's and Mike Trezanos and Julio Arce, who are known for their striking. I promise you, all of them have a great wrestling background as well. We talked about it for a while. Like, we just keep waiting for Shane Burgos to do it in the cage instead of getting stuck in these striking battles to use his takedowns. And you just don't see it very often. But it's there. It's there. The base is there.
Hey, he does have one submission in the UFC so far. So I'm saying he does have the jits.
And more than nothing, like we keep saying, like I keep saying, takedown defense. If you don't have a base in takedown defense, even Michael Venom Page, known for kickboxing, known for trying to knock you out, he went up against, I think it was Ross Houston, right? A couple fights ago.
Yep.
Houston kept trying to take him down. Guess what? Page kept getting back up. Or he'd fight him getting him down, like using his takedown defense. Was he like vicious off his back? No. But he knew how to get back up, and he knew how to stop from being taken down. And Adesanya, you saw that against Vettori. That takedown defense goes miles when you're a high-level striker. And you might not be a world-class wrestler, but you need to know how to stop a world-class wrestler, or you're going to be in for a long night. They might not come out and finish you in 30 seconds, but they can grind you out for a full fight and win just on points alone. So takedowns have always been a huge part of MMA, and control, time, cage control. It's a big deal. So I think we both agree on this one. Wrestling is the best, at least base for MMA. I think you need to evolve everything to be a superstar in this sport. I think everybody knows that. That's kind of common sense. Even if common sense isn't so common, I think in this case, I think most people would agree with that one. But leave a comment below. Let us know. Shorter episode because we really didn't have much to debate about this one. I tried to drag it out and fight him a little bit, but he stood his ground. Wrestling is the base. Leave a comment below. Let us know. Do you agree with Brandon and I? Is wrestling the core element that probably stands above everything else? Do you think it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, and Muay Thai, or any other discipline that goes into what we call mixed martial arts? Karate is another one we didn't talk much about when we talk about the Wonder Boy Thompsons and the Lyoto Machidas and stuff like that, coming out from different angles that you don't see coming. That's another thing to talk about. But that's a discussion for a different day. What is the best style in MMA? Both Brandon and I say wrestling. This is Battleground. Make sure you pay attention to Fighters First Network. We got great shows coming out all the time. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. And remember, January 5th, Brandon and I will be back doing our day jobs for Art of MMA. But I think we might keep this thing going. Let us know. Drop a comment. You like Battleground? Let us know some other subjects you wanted to talk about too. But for the mechanic, Brandon Catino, I'm Mike Ginn, and we're out.